Fiber evidence linking to Ramsey clothing in the JonBenet Ramsey case. We've been talking about that some of the past videos, working through what was found and what it means, the implications of that being on the scene, different things. Some of the uh, fiber evidence was surmised by crime journalist Ryan Ross in Crime Magazine. Ross reviewed crime lab results and prosecutor statements and noted several important comparisons. Fibers from Patsy's red and black sweater jacket. Some of the comparisons found from the same type of sweater jacket Patsy wore to a Christmas dinner, embedded on the adhesive side of the duct tape taken from JonBenét's mouth. Similar fibers were found in a paint tray in the basement and tied into the ligature around the head region of her. This suggests that the sweater jacket or a similar garment was present near the crime scene. Some investigators argued that the fibers could have transferred innocently when John Ramsey dropped the duct tape onto the blanket that had been in contact with Patsy's clothing right when she was upstairs, putting John Benét to sleep. And so that's the explanation for that. Onto the blanket when she had been in contact with Patsy's clothing. But you missed one part, my brother, my sister. You miss one part. But Ross observed that the paint tray and ligature, which apparently were not sourced to the home, were never near the blanket. And that Patsy said, and that's what I'm saying, Patsy said she never wore that sweater jacket while painting. So, while you might try to explain away why Patsy's or similar garments to Patsy's fibers, little fibers, might have been on the blanket, what you did not explain is why those fibers were in a paint tray that she said she never even wore that jacket around. She said, I don't even wear that to paint. Which subtly lets me know something. The underlying subtlety of that statement is that this is a nice jacket for me. I don't wear nice clothes when I'm painting. And if I don't wear nice clothes when I'm painting, I probably ain't gonna wear nice clothes when I'm doing anything strenuous, or I shouldn't be wearing these nice clothes, or when I get myself in a bind. Right. That's for another topic. But Ross observed that the paint tray and the ligature were far from the blanket, and that Patsy said she had never wore that jacket while painting. Let's dive a little bit further. Fibers from John's black wool shirt made in Israel. Ross reported that crime lab tests found fibers from the same type of black wool shirt made in Israel that John Ramsey wore to the White's Christmas dinner in the underwear of JonBenet that she was wearing when she was found in her private area. John had carried JonBenet to bed, but stated that he did not undress her. Patsy confirmed that she handled her daughter's clothing, and there was no obvious explanation for why fibers from his shirt or similar garment were inside of her undergarments. During a 2000 interrogation, prosecutors confronted John with this finding, and he responded angrily, calling the claim bull. I'm going to censor myself. That's bull. And his attorney, Lynn Wood, argued that fiber comparisons can be overstated. Oh, I bet they can. I bet they can. Absolutely, they can. So overstated, because this is the thing. When the fiber evidence came, as you remember, when it came to light, the investigators brought it out of nowhere so fast and so abruptly, it sent John and Patsy into a frenzy. They let it loose on Patsy first, I believe. And and Linwood and John were livid. They felt ambushed, but then, well, no, Linwood was livid. But the next day, they were more prepared for it. John and Linwood were more prepared for it because the investigators brought it up again. But they were still livid. They were still mad about it, because what the insinuation was that, John had, done something, inappropriate. And he was trying to kind of, steer clear of that. And so they were in a frenzy, to say the least. So John responds to this claim angrily, says it's not true. And Linwood comes to his defense. Ross emphasized that fiber matches were described by investigators as chemically and microscopically consistent, rather than identical, highlighting limitations in forensic fiber analysis. The Ramsey's attorney suggested that numerous fibers could be present and that the matches may only show general similarity rather than definitive sourcing. I would argue, and this is where, if I was sitting in the interrogation room, I would have pressed that further. Because what he's saying, and we said this before, he's saying, well, anything could be correct. But let's walk down the path and the scenario really quickly. You're suggesting to me that the criminal may have gotten hold to your garments and taken them downstairs to frame you. Or you're suggesting to me that the criminal or criminals just happened to be wearing the same thing that night. And I would have pressed and I said, so how much did you pay for your sweater, John? How much did you pay for your sweater, Patsy? That something like this just happened to be on a crime scene, because we start to see very luxurious items pop up on the crime scene in a very luxurious home. With very luxurious people. And I just wonder, how did that get there? Let's move on. We got more to cover. As you may know, we have been talking about, beaver fur clothing, things of that nature, because it's tied to, I believe, this up here, beaver hair on the duct tape. And if you haven't watched other episodes, then, let me just refresh you. In the 2003 Wolf versus Ramsey decision, they were talking about some of the physical evidence from the JonBenét Ramsey case. And there was beaver hair on the duct tape when JonBenét's body was found. Black duct tape covered her mouth. Animal hair alleged to be beaver was embedded in the tape's adhesive. Right? And so the court noted that nothing in the Ramsey's home contained beaver fur. So they said that it should be sourced outside of the house. Ha 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 ha! If the beaver fur is sourced outside of the house, But we also have red fibers, microscopically consistent with what Patsy was wearing. And we know that those are accurate because John tried to give two different garments, and they said, not this one, this one. And it just so happens to be the ones that you guys were wearing on Christmas night. So if there is, we get ourselves into a weird situation, because if there is beaver fur that could not be sourced to the inside of the house, and it ends up on the adhesive side of some tape that you never seen. You've never seen this tape. How is it then that fibers microscopically similar to what you were wearing the night of your Christmas party also end up under the adhesive side of the tape that was sourced outside the house? How? We got a problem. Somebody's lying. Because what we don't see in the judgment is that while they say, oh, the beaver, because that's what I'm saying. When you don't think critically, you start running. When a lie is a lie, we start having problems. Because you can tell me that the beaver fur, since it's not found in the home, it's sourced outside of the house. Fine. I think that's very naive to say that. It's quite ignorant. Because that's like saying, oh, because we can't find the weapon in the home, then that means automatically it came from outside the home. That's what we're saying. Absolutely not. That's ignorant. Who would say that? That is not automatic at all. But yet that's what's being concluded and ruled by Judge Carnes in this case. If it's not inside the house when we look, then it didn't source from there. Oh, well, how is something that was sourced from the outside interacting with something that was sourced from the inside to a retail? We don't find any more evidence around the house of this beaver fur. It's like it came and went and it vanished. But we see that the fibers from the red sweater travel. They make their way down into the paint tray. They make their way into the weapon that was used on John Benét. How do those two worlds, and that's what we've been trying to talk about and understand, because what's not being answered is, how do those two worlds collide? You have touch DNA to where you say, I couldn't find the Barbie nightgown. How then is your DNA and your son's DNA on that nightgown? If nobody could find it, how is it there? And how do we get the beaver fur that's not from here to mingle with the fur or with the sweater that is from here, possibly? And if you say then neither one of them are, okay, so now we're talking about they had the same sweater as you or something microscopically similar, and now we have to believe that the black wool sweater that John was wearing from Israel, because we're sourcing it back not to just a generic USA made in China brand. We're talking about made in Israel that showed up on the crime scene in a more intimate space where it shouldn't be there at all. So we move on, and they talk to Patsy about, What do you think about this, that, and there? And she'll, yeah, I had some leopard fur, and you know, I don't think I read it. I may have, maybe he didn't, but John was talking about having some sort of naga hide or something that he had. I think we talked about, and some lining in his coat or something like that. That was some sort of skin in one of his coats or whatever. But that was his source, and then we go through the fiber evidence, um, linking to the Ramsey's clothing, and so we circle back around to characteristics and price of beaver fur clothing. And I was trying to do a little research. You know how it is. Trying to do a little research, trying to stay in the vein and trying to be accurate. Trying to understand a little bit about. So when we're talking about beaver fur, because I said I haven't heard of beaver fur in any meaningful way, um, just in regular, just normal conversation. Taxidermy circles typically, like I said, it's a bear, it's an alligator, it's a deer. I'm pretty sure there's other things, but a beaver is not one that I've heard a lot, quite honestly, at all. So is a beaver rare or not? Who is wearing beaver fur? Why is it being worn? Modern fur manufacturers describe beaver fur as soft, dense, and water repellent, with long guard hairs and a thick underfur. Natural beaver retains the long guard hairs and has a rugged appearance. It is considered ideal for men's coats, but is also used for casual wear by both men and women. Sheared beaver has the guard hairs plucked and sheared to a velvety pile. Only top quality pelts can be used for shearing, which makes sheared beaver garments more expensive. Prices reported by fur retailers show that natural long-haired, and I'm right here, natural long-haired beaver coats typically retail between for about somewhere between $2,000 and $5,000 US dollars, right? Wherever you are watching, convert that to your currency and you'll see. But in the US, a coat for about $2,000 to $5,000 is a lot of money. Just walk in and be like, "Oh yeah, absolutely. I'll have that $2,000 coat right there." $2,000 to $5,000, and this is what I'm saying. Hold on. While sheared and dyed beaver coats start around $4,000 and can exceed $7,000. Talking about coats. Hold on. Custom dress weight beaver hats start around $700. $700 for a hat in beaver. And Western weight hats start around $800. Trapper style hats and accessories cost a few $100s. Because of its durability and water repellent qualities, beaver fur has been described as a lifetime investment. Natural beaver's rugged look has historically made it popular in men's outerwear, but modern fashion uses beaver fur for garments worn by all genders. So we are kind of, in a way, pointed toward sort of a male wearer of this beaver fur, but it could be in some cases worn by women. But men seem to have a lot of use for it, and since it would make sense, since the male intruder is or the intruder is supposed to be male, that makes a lot of sense. But the point that I wanted to get to is that it's expensive. Beaver fur is expensive. You don't just, well, and this is what I'm saying. What you won't hear on the news is this stuff. Beaver fur, you don't just go, and that's what I'm saying. Like, you got to look at things and be like, huh, Beaver fur. Have I heard of beaver fur? What would beaver fur? Israeli wool was already threw me off. Israeli wool already threw me off. Oh, this man has money. Now we're talking about beaver fur that could cost for a coat somewhere between two grand to 5 grand. If I want to use my handy dandy calculator, you know what? Let's just use ChatGPT. And I'm going to ask ChatGPT if a beaver fur coat costed or costs somewhere between $2,000 and $5,000 in today's modern society, we're in 2026. How much do you think that coat would cost? The range that coat would cost in 1996. Period. Additionally, if a beaver and that's just for a natural long-haired beaver coat. Additionally, if we're thinking about a sheared and dyed beaver coat that has a range of 4,000 plus and exceeding $7,000 in 2026, what would that cost be in 1996? And then lastly, if you look at a beaver hat that starts around $700 and maybe a Western weight hat starts around $800, and then some trapper style beaver hats that are costing you around a few $100s in 2026, how much do you think that would be in 1996? Because one of the problems that I keep running into is that this is a very expensive attack. We are not just looking at anyone as John or some would suppose. It's like you got to nail it down. We are looking at someone who had means and had money to commit this crime. And as measured, as we're being told this criminal was, for some reason, this criminal didn't think it necessary to leave his good clothes at home when he was trying to commit a robbery. Well, using CPI based inflation, $1 in 1996 is about $2.08 in 2026. I'm going to say that again. $1 in 1996 is equivalent to $2.08 in 2026. So to convert a 2026 price back to 1996 dollars, you divide by about $2.08. So you take $2,000 divided by $2.08. You take $5,000 divided by $2.08. Chat uses the official BLS CPI-U basis reflected in the BLS inflation calculator CPI tables, with February 2026 CPI at 326.785 and the 1996 average CPI at 156.9, which puts the ratio at about 2.08 is where they're getting their number. Thanks, chat. So the rough 1996 equivalent would be for the natural long-haired beaver coat, $2,000 in 2026 would be about $960 in 1996. $5,000 in 2026 would be about $2,401 in 1996. That's for the natural long-haired beaver coat. For the sheared and dyed beaver coat, $4,000 would be about $1,900 in 2026. $4,000 in 2026 would be about $1,920 in 1996. $7,000 in 2026 would be about $3,361 in 1996. The beaver hats. For a $700 beaver hat in 2026, that would be about $336.96. For an $800 hat in 2026, that would be about $384 in 1996. And we're talking about fewer $100s, $300, maybe $500, just give it a range. For $300, you date that back to 1996, that's about $144. And $500, if we want to take that range, about $240 in 1996. So in plain terms, a fairly nice beaver coat in 1996 could still have been a high-end but very plausible luxury garment, especially in a wealthy social circle. More premium processed beaver coat would land in roughly the $2,000 to $3,400 range in 1996, which is expensive, but not some impossible celebrity only item. Right. I like that they said that. So this would fit in a range for someone who was not a celebrity, but maybe had a little money. This could fit. This could fit someone who maybe they're not Michael Jordan, you know what I mean? They're not making Michael Jordan money. I don't know. But they balling a little bit. You know what I mean? They got a little money. I don't know. Maybe it fits within the budget of somebody cool, prone to buying nice things. I don't know. Maybe it's in the range of somebody who had enough money to hire a celebrity attorney team. I don't know. I'm not saying that's the case. I'm just saying it would fit the budget. It might fit the budget. You know, if you can buy a plane, you can buy a coat. Let me know what you think in the comments. Like, share, and subscribe. We're gonna keep on going with this. Like, share, and subscribe. I'm not done. And like I said, take care of yourself. Make sure you're doing well. And appreciate you watching. Much love to you. And oh no, don't leave me. Don't say where you at. Until next time, take it easy.